After 10 years apart, he found his lost love in the rain with twins. He kissed her passionately, and a secret changed his life forever. Hi, my very loyal and beautiful family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter Stories. How are you, my beautiful family? I pray that God's love surrounds you, His grace uplifts you, and His blessings overflow in your life. You are never alone. He is with you, and so am I. Let's begin with a powerful prayer, my family. Heavenly Father, you are the breath in our lungs, the fire in our souls, and the strength in our hearts. Today, I lift up my beautiful family before you. Wrap them in your endless love, shield them from every storm, and fill their lives with miracles beyond measure. Let every closed door open, every sorrow turn to joy, and every battle end in victory. May they walk in your favor, rise above every struggle, and shine like the stars you created them to be. Amen. My family, are you happy with my stories? Do you remember our mission? 20,000 completions by March 31st. But my beautiful family, this is more than just a number. This is our journey, our comeback, our rise. I've been away because of my treatment, but my heart has never left you. And now this channel is in your hands. Only your love, your faith, your unwavering support can lift us higher. And I know you will make it happen. We will rise again. No pain, no setback, no challenge can break us. We are one family, bound by love, strengthened by faith, and destined for greatness. Together, we will lift this channel higher than ever before, brighter, stronger, and more unshakable than the world has ever seen. Now, my beautiful family, James will bring you today's story. Let your heart be open, let your soul be touched, and let this moment remind you of the power of love and unity. Sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Chapter 1. First Glimpse. The Venetian air hung heavy with promise as Dominic Valente adjusted his bow tie before entering the gilded ballroom of Palazzo Contarini. At 32, he had already made a name for himself in architectural circles, but these social gatherings still made him uncomfortable. He preferred the solitude of his drafting table, where buildings took shape under his careful hand, each line a testament to his vision. For God's sake, Dominic, you look like you're walking to your execution. Alessandro Moretti, his business partner and oldest friend, appeared at his side with 2 crystal flutes of champagne. Here, liquid courage. Dominic accepted the glass with a grateful nod. You know how I feel about these events, all this posturing and preening. And patronage, Alessandro reminded him with a wink. The Contessa herself has been asking about you. One commission from her could set us up for life. The grand ballroom glittered with Venice's elite, old money and new, politicians and artists, all swirling together in a dance as complex as the Baroque ceiling above them. Dominic took a deep breath and squared his shoulders. For the sake of their fledgling firm, he would endure a few hours of small talk. And then he saw her. She stood by the grand windows overlooking the Grand Canal, moonlight streaming through the glass to create a halo around her silhouette. Her emerald dress caught the light as she turned, revealing a face that seemed carved from his most beautiful dreams. Dark curls cascaded down her back, and when she smiled at something her companion said, Dominic felt his heart stutter in his chest. "Who is she?" he asked, not realizing he'd spoken aloud until Alessandro answered. "Serafina Castellano, daughter of Giuseppe Castellano, the shipping magnate." Alessandro's voice held a note of warning. "Beautiful, isn't she? But don't waste your time. Her father guards her like a dragon with treasure. Besides, she's rumored to be engaged to Count Ricci's son." Dominic barely heard the warning. His feet were already moving, drawn to her by some invisible force he couldn't name. Their eyes met as he approached, and the world around them seemed to blur and fade. Her eyes, deep green with flecks of gold, widened slightly. Recognition of something significant passing between them, though they'd never met. "Signorina Castellano," he said, bowing slightly. "I'm Dominic Valente." "The architect," she replied, her voice like warm honey, musical and rich. "I've admired your restoration of the Chiesa di San Moise. You have a gift for breathing life into old stones." Surprise flickered across his face. "You know my work?" "I make it a point to know beautiful things," she said, a hint of mischief in her smile. "Your vision for the church respected its history while bringing it into the present. Not many architects understand that balance." Her companion, a woman with shrewd eyes and a maternal air, cleared her throat pointedly. "Serafina, your father was looking for you." "Just a moment, Aunt Lucia," Serafina replied without taking her eyes from Dominic's. "Signor Valente was just about to tell me about his current project." The older woman's lips thinned with disapproval, but she stepped away, giving them a modicum of privacy while remaining within sight. "I wasn't," Dominic said with a small smile, "but I'd be happy to. Perhaps over a dance." Serafina glanced at her aunt, then back to him. "One dance," she agreed, placing her gloved hand in his. As they moved onto the dance floor, the orchestra began a Strauss waltz. Dominic placed his hand at the small of her back, feeling the warmth of her body through the silk of her gown. They moved together as if they'd danced 1,000 times before, their bodies finding a perfect rhythm. "You dance well for an architect," she murmured. "I would have expected you to be buried in blueprints, not practicing the waltz." "My mother insisted all her sons learn," he replied. "She said art existed in many forms, and we should appreciate them all." A wise woman. She was. Serafina caught the past tense, and her expression softened. "I'm sorry." "It was many years ago," Dominic said. "But thank you." As they circled the floor, he found himself telling her things he rarely shared, about growing up in a modest home in Milan, about his father's carpentry shop, where he first learned to appreciate the beauty of creation, about the scholarship that had allowed him to study architecture in Florence. "And now you're the toast of Venice," she said. "Hardly," he laughed, "but I'm building a reputation. One day I hope to design something truly magnificent, a building that will stand for centuries and speak to the soul." "Like the great cathedrals," she nodded. "I've always thought they were the most perfect marriage of art and engineering. Faith made tangible." "Exactly," he said, surprised and delighted by her understanding. "Most people just see the grandeur, but miss the mathematics beneath, the precision required to lift stone toward heaven." The music ended too soon, and Dominic reluctantly released her. "Would you walk with me?" he asked as other couples moved around them. "The gardens here are quite magnificent." Serafina glanced toward her aunt, who was now deep in conversation with an elderly countess. "Just for a moment," she agreed. On the moonlit terrace, away from prying eyes, they stood in comfortable silence. The sounds of Venice, water lapping against stone, distant laughter, the occasional gondolier's song, creating a perfect backdrop for two souls discovering each other. "I feel as though I've known you before," Dominic said softly, surprised by his own boldness. "In another life, perhaps." Serafina's smile held a hint of sadness. "Perhaps we have, but this life is complicated, Signor Valente." "Dominic," he corrected, "and complications don't frighten me." "They should," she said, but there was no conviction in her voice. "My father has very specific plans for my future." "And what do you want for your future?" The question seemed to startle her, as if no one had ever asked before. "I want—" she began, then stopped, searching for words. "I want to see the world beyond gilt frames and marble halls. I want to create something lasting." She turned to him, her eyes bright in the moonlight. "I want to live before I'm sealed away in a marriage of convenience." When she shivered slightly in the evening breeze, he placed his jacket around her shoulders. Their fingers brushed, and the spark between them was undeniable. As they stood there, Venice spread out before them like a jeweled tapestry. Dominic felt something shift inside him, as if his life had been slightly off-center until this moment, and now everything aligned perfectly. "There you are," Giuseppe Castellano's voice cut through the night air like a blade. "Serafina, it's time to leave." Dominic turned to see a tall man with silvering hair and cold eyes that assessed him with instant dislike. Serafina stiffened beside him, her hand falling away from his. "Father," she said, her voice taking on a formal tone he hadn't heard before, "may I present Dominic Valente, the architect?" "I know who he is," Castellano interrupted. "The terrace is no place for my daughter, Signor Valente." "We were just discussing architecture, sir," Dominic said, extending his hand. "Your daughter has a remarkable understanding of the subject." Castellano ignored the offered hand. "Serafina, your aunt is waiting. We're leaving." She removed Dominic's jacket and handed it back to him, her fingers lingering against his for a heartbeat longer than necessary. "Thank you for the dance, Signor Valente," she said formally, but her eyes conveyed a different message entirely. "The pleasure was mine, Signorina Castellano," he replied, bowing slightly. As she turned to follow her father, she glanced back over her shoulder. "Perhaps we'll meet again to continue our discussion of architecture." "I would like nothing more," Dominic said, his heart racing at the promise in her words. Giuseppe Castellano's scowl deepened as he placed a possessive hand on his daughter's shoulder, guiding her firmly back inside. Dominic remained on the terrace, watching her disappear into the crowd, still feeling the phantom warmth of her hand in his. Alessandro found him there some time later, staring out at the moonlit canal. "I warned you," he said, not unkindly. "Castellano guards his daughter like a state treasure." "She's not a treasure," Dominic said quietly. "She's a woman with a mind of her own." "A dangerous combination in Venetian society," Alessandro sighed. "Come, my friend, there are other beautiful women here, ones without dragons for fathers." But Dominic knew, with a certainty that defied reason, that there were no other women for him. Not anymore. Something had awakened in him tonight, something that would not be easily put back to sleep. "I'll see her again," he said. Alessandro looked at him with concern. "Dominic." "I'll see her again," he repeated, more firmly this time. "Some things are meant to be, Alessandro. Some meetings are written in the stars." As they left the palazzo, Dominic felt like a different man than the one who had arrived hours earlier. The night air felt sharper, the stars brighter, the whole world somehow more vivid. He had glimpsed something rare and precious in Serafina's eyes, a kindred spirit, a possible future, and he would move heaven and earth to see her again. Chapter 2. A Night of Passion. Spring in Venice brought renewal that matched the blossoming feelings between Dominic and Serafina. For 3 weeks following their encounter at the Palazzo Contarini, they had met in secret, stolen moments in hidden gardens, quiet cafes, and once in the empty Basilica di San Marco, where they sat in reverent silence, shoulders touching, sharing more in that quiet moment than words could express. Each meeting was arranged through discreet notes passed by Serafina's companion and confidant, Rosa, who had taken pity on the young lovers. "My mistress has never smiled so much," she confided to Dominic one afternoon as she delivered a sealed envelope. "You've awakened something in her that I feared her father had crushed forever." Serafina was unlike anyone Dominic had ever known. Educated at the Sorbonne, she spoke 4 languages fluently and discussed obscure architectural theories with the same passion she brought to debates about Italian poetry. She sketched buildings with a natural talent that made Dominic both envious and proud. "You should have been an architect," he told her one afternoon as they sat in his small studio, her charcoal moving deftly across paper. In another life, perhaps, she replied with that enigmatic smile that both captivated and puzzled him. In this one, I am my father's daughter. She spoke little of her family, changing the subject whenever Dominic asked about her home life. He sensed a shadow there, but respected her privacy. What mattered was the growing bond between them, the way their hands sought each other when they walked, the lingering goodbyes that grew longer each time they parted. On the night that changed everything, rain fell in sheets across Venice. They had been viewing an exhibition at the Gallery dell'Accademia when the skies opened. Laughing, they ran through narrow streets, seeking shelter, eventually finding themselves soaked and breathless at the door to Dominic's apartment near Campo San Barnaba. "Come in," he said, suddenly aware of how intimate the invitation sounded. "Just until the rain stops." Inside his modest home, with its view of the smaller canals and walls covered in sketches, Serafina seemed to belong. She wandered from drawing to drawing, her wet dress clinging to her curves, hair darkened by rain to nearly black. "You see the world as it could be," she said softly, touching a rendering of a restored palazzo. "That's why I—" She stopped, turning to face him. "Why you what?" Dominic asked, his heart pounding. Instead of answering, she crossed the room and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, then grew in intensity as weeks of longing overcame them both. Her hands tangled in his hair as his arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer. "Serafina," he whispered against her mouth. "Are you certain?" In answer, she began unbuttoning his shirt, her fingers trembling slightly. "I have never been more certain of anything in my life." Lightning illuminated the room in brilliant flashes as Dominic lit candles around them. In their warm glow, he slowly peeled away the layers of her damp clothing, revealing olive skin that glowed like satin in the flickering light. His breath caught at the sight of her, a vision more beautiful than any building he had ever designed, any artwork he had ever admired. "You're perfect," he whispered, trailing reverent fingers along the curve of her shoulder. Her smile was both shy and knowing as she guided his hands. "Not perfect," she murmured, "just yours. Tonight I am entirely yours." Outside, thunder crashed across the Venetian sky as they discovered each other in the candlelight. Dominic memorized every inch of her, the birthmark on her left shoulder, the way her breath caught when he kissed her neck, the soft sounds she made as they moved together. Their lovemaking was both tender and passionate, a perfect balance of giving and taking, of discovery and surrender. When she cried out his name, it was like a prayer, and he answered with whispered words of devotion against her skin. They came together in a moment of perfect synchronicity, as if their bodies had always known how to dance this most intimate of dances. Afterward, as they lay entwined in his bed, the rain a gentle backdrop to their whispered conversations, Dominic traced patterns on her bare shoulder. "I love you," he said simply. "I've never said those words to anyone before, but I love you, Serafina Castellano." She propped herself up on one elbow, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "And I love you, Dominic Valente, more than I should, more than is wise." "Nothing about love is wise," he replied, pulling her back into his arms. "But I wouldn't trade this feeling for all the wisdom in the world." The rain continued through the night, cocooning them in their private world. They made love again as midnight approached, then again as dawn broke over the lagoon. Between their passionate encounters, they talked of dreams, a home they would build together, places they would visit, the life they would share. "My father will never accept this," Serafina said as the first light of day filtered through the windows. "He has plans for me, for our family's legacy." "Then we'll leave," Dominic said, brushing a curl from her face. "Venice is beautiful, but the world is vast. My work can take us anywhere, Paris, London, even America." "You would leave everything you've built here? For me?" For us, he corrected, buildings can be designed anywhere. What I feel for you, that's irreplaceable. Serafina's eyes filled with tears as she kissed him deeply. No one has ever put me first, she whispered. My whole life has been shaped by my father's ambitions, my family's expectations. Your life is your own, Dominic said fiercely, and if you choose to share it with me, I promise to cherish every moment. They sealed this promise with another passionate embrace, their bodies speaking what words could only hint at. As they moved together, the morning light bathed them in gold, transforming their union into something almost sacred. Later, as Serafina dozed in his arms, Dominic watched the play of sunlight across her features. He imagined waking to this sight every morning, growing old beside her, building not just structures of stone and wood, but a life filled with love and purpose. For the first time, he understood that his greatest creation would not be a building, but the life they would craft together. Promise me, Serafina said sleepily as she curled against his chest, that no matter what happens, you'll remember this night. I promise, Dominic murmured, already drifting into dreams beside her. But nothing will happen. This is just the beginning. As sleep claimed them both, the rain finally stopped, and sunlight spilled across Venice, illuminating a world that seemed newborn and full of possibilities. Chapter 3. Vanished without a trace. Dominic woke to sunlight streaming through his windows and an empty bed. The indent of Serafina's head on the pillow was still visible, and for a moment he thought she must be in the kitchen or bathroom. But as he called her name and received no answer, a creeping dread began to settle in his stomach. He searched every room of his small apartment, finding nothing, no note, no forgotten earring, not even a stray hair to prove she had been there at all. Only the lingering scent of her perfume on his sheets remained, a ghostly reminder of their night of passion. Confused and increasingly worried, he dressed quickly and went to the cafe where they often met. The owner, Marco, greeted him with a friendly wave. "Have you seen Serafina this morning?" Dominic asked, trying to keep his voice casual. Marco shook his head. "Not today. Is everything all right?" "Yes, fine," Dominic lied, already turning to leave. By midday, concern had blossomed into fear. He found himself at the modest quarters adjacent to the Castellano servants' entrance, seeking out Rosa, who had facilitated their meetings. "Signor Valente," she whispered, glancing nervously over her shoulder as she spoke through the barely opened door of her small room. "You shouldn't be here. If the head butler sees you—" "Where is she, Rosa?" "What's happened?" The woman's eyes were red-rimmed as if she'd been crying. "I don't know, truly. She was gone when I arrived to help her dress this morning, her bed not slept in, some of her things missing. The household is in chaos. Did she leave a message for me? Anything?" Lucia shook her head. "Nothing. But Signor Castellano is in a rage like I've never seen. Please, you must go before someone sees you." His next stop was the Castellano Palazzo itself. The imposing building loomed over the Grand Canal, its Gothic architecture a stark contrast to the sunlit day. Dominic hesitated before knocking, knowing that presenting himself uninvited at Giuseppe Castellano's door might cause problems, but his need to find Serafina outweighed all caution. A stern-faced butler answered. "Yes?" "I need to speak with Signorina Castellano," Dominic said, straightening his posture. "I'm Dominic Valente. She'll know who I am." The butler's expression remained impassive. "I regret to inform you that Signorina Castellano is not here." "When do you expect her back?" "I cannot say, sir. Now, if you'll excuse me—" "Please." Dominic placed his foot in the door as the butler began to close it. "Is there a message I can leave for her? Or perhaps her father could tell me where she's gone?" The butler's eyes narrowed slightly. "Signor Castellano is not receiving visitors. Good day." The door closed firmly in Dominic's face. He stood there for a long moment, uncertainty and fear battling within him. Something was wrong, he could feel it in his bones. For the next week, Dominic haunted their usual meeting places, asked mutual acquaintances, even hired a gondolier to row past the Castellano Palazzo at different hours, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. Nothing. Whispers began to circulate through Venetian society. Serafina Castellano had been sent away, some said to a convent, others to relatives in Sicily. Some suggested she had eloped with a foreign count. The gossip grew more outlandish with each passing day, but Dominic found no truth in any of it. Alessandro watched his friend's descent into obsession with growing concern. "You must eat, Dominic," he insisted, placing a plate of pasta before him nearly 2 weeks after Serafina's disappearance. "Starving yourself won't bring her back." "I can't understand it," Dominic said, pushing the food around his plate. "How could she just vanish? How could she leave without a word after what we shared?" "Perhaps she had no choice," Alessandro suggested gently. "The Castellanos are powerful. If her father discovered your relationship—" The thought had occurred to Dominic as well, fueling his determination. At last, through a business connection, he secured a meeting with Giuseppe Castellano himself. The shipping magnate was a hard-faced man with cold eyes that revealed nothing as Dominic explained his relationship with Serafina. "My daughter has been sent to relatives in Sicily," Castellano said at last, his voice as sharp as broken glass. "Family matters. She will not be returning to Venice." "May I have her address?" Dominic asked. "I would like to write to her." Castellano's laugh was without humor. "Young man, whatever you believe existed between you and my daughter was a diversion, nothing more. Serafina has always known her duty to this family. She is to marry Conte Ricci this autumn." The words hit Dominic like physical blows. "I don't believe you. She loves me." "Love," Castellano spat the word as if it tasted foul. "What do you know of love? You have nothing to offer her but pretty words and an obscure talent. The Castellanos have been in Venice for 7 generations. We do not throw away our legacy for summer romances." "At least let me speak with her," Dominic pleaded. "Let her tell me herself." "Enough!" Castellano rose, signaling the end of the meeting. "My daughter is where she belongs, with her family. Do not attempt to contact her again, or I will ensure your architectural career in Venice is over before it truly begins." Dominic left the palazzo in a daze, his mind refusing to accept what he had heard. Serafina would never leave without saying goodbye, would never agree to marry another man after what they had shared. Something deeper was at play, something that made her disappear so completely. In the weeks that followed, Dominic's search grew desperate. He traveled to Sicily, visiting every town where the Castellanos had connections, only to find closed doors and silent refusals. In Palermo, he thought he caught a glimpse of her in a passing carriage, but when he gave chase, the vehicle disappeared into the crowded streets. One elderly servant in a Castellano summer home, moved by his obvious distress, whispered that no family daughter had come to Sicily in recent memory. "The master has not visited this house in years," she confided. "Whoever told you she was here was lying." The realization that Giuseppe had lied only deepened Dominic's resolve. But as months passed with no word, no sign, his hope began to fade like morning mist on the canals. Serafina had vanished as completely as if she had never existed, leaving behind only memories and the lingering scent of her perfume that Dominic sometimes imagined he could still detect on his pillow late at night. "She's gone, Dominic," Alessandro said gently 1 year after her disappearance. They sat in Dominic's studio, blueprints scattered around them, a half-empty bottle of wine between them. "Whatever happened, wherever she went, she chose not to tell you. You must accept that." Dominic stared out the window at the Venice skyline, his creation rising among ancient spires. "If she had chosen to leave me, I could accept it. But something happened, Alessandro. Something forced her away. What could possibly force someone to disappear so completely? Dominic had no answer. But in his heart he knew Serafina would never have left, willingly. Not after the night they had shared. Not after the promises they had made. As the first anniversary of her disappearance approached, Dominic found himself standing on the bridge where they had shared their first kiss outside the palazzo. The water below reflected the stars, just as it had that night. He removed a small velvet box from his pocket, the ring he had been planning to give her, commissioned from a master jeweler in Florence, an emerald surrounded by diamonds to match her eyes. "I will find you," he whispered to the night air. "No matter how long it takes, no matter where you've gone, I will find you, Serafina." He didn't throw the ring into the canal as part of him wanted to. Instead, he tucked it back into his pocket, a tangible reminder of his vow. Somewhere, she was out there, and somehow he would find her again. As he walked home through the quiet streets of Venice, Dominic felt the weight of her absence like a physical pain. But beneath the grief lay a determination that would not be extinguished. Their story was not over. It could not be over, for in the depths of his soul he knew that what they had shared was too rare, too precious to be lost forever. The love he felt for Serafina had not diminished with her disappearance. If anything, it had grown stronger, refined by the fire of separation into something unbreakable. And so he would wait, and he would search, and he would never give up hope that someday, somehow, he would look into those emerald eyes again. Chapter 4. Ghosts of the Past. 2 years after Serafina's disappearance, Venice celebrated the completion of Dominic Valente's crowning achievement, the restoration of the historic Teatro San Lorenzo. What had once been a crumbling relic was now the jewel of the city, its elegance and innovative design earning acclaim across Europe. Dominic stood alone on the empty stage the night before the grand opening, surrounded by the beauty he had created, feeling utterly hollow. "There you are," Alessandro's voice echoed through the empty theater. "The governor is looking for you. Half of Venice's elite are at the reception." Dominic nodded without turning. "I'll be there shortly." "You've done something remarkable here," Alessandro said, joining him on the stage. "You should be celebrating, not hiding in shadows." "I'm not hiding." "No? Then what do you call avoiding Isabella for the past hour? The poor woman has been trying to catch your attention all evening." Dominic sighed. Isabella Ricci, daughter of the influential Count Ricci, ironically the same family Serafina had supposedly been promised to, had made her interest in him clear over recent months. She was beautiful, intelligent, and genuinely admired his work. Any other man would consider himself fortunate. "It's been 2 years, Dominic," Alessandro said gently. 2 years of watching you live like a ghost. Isabella cares for you. She could bring you back to life. I'm not dead. Aren't you? You work, you eat, you sleep. But when was the last time you truly lived? The question hung in the air between them, unanswerable because they both knew the truth. Dominic hadn't truly lived since the morning he woke to find Serafina gone. That evening, under pressure from Alessandro and caught in a moment of weakness, Dominic escorted Isabella home from the reception. Her family's palazzo was grand and imposing, not unlike the Castellano estate. When she invited him in for a nightcap, he accepted out of politeness rather than desire. "Your theater is magnificent," Isabella said as they sat in her father's lavish study. "You've captured something uniquely Venetian while creating something entirely new." "Thank you," Dominic replied, sipping the expensive brandy she'd poured. "The building had good bones. It just needed someone to remember its soul." Isabella moved closer, her perfume, too sweet, too heavy, enveloping him. "You speak of buildings as if they're alive." "The best ones are." Dominic shifted slightly, maintaining distance. "They breathe. They speak. They hold memories. "And what memories will your theater hold?" she asked, her hand coming to rest on his arm. Before he could answer, Isabella leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was pleasant enough. She was clearly experienced, but Dominic felt nothing. No spark, no connection, none of the overwhelming passion he had known with Serafina. When Isabella's hands began to wander, he gently took them in his own and pulled away. "Isabella," he said softly, "you're a remarkable woman. Any man would be fortunate to have your attention." "But not you," she finished for him, withdrawing her hands. Her expression held more resignation than hurt. "It's her, isn't it? Serafina Castellano. They say you've never gotten over her." Dominic didn't deny it. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," Isabella sighed. "At least you're honest. That's more than most men in Venice." She stood, straightening her dress. "They say she ran away with an American shipping heir, or was locked in a convent, or died in childbirth in some remote village. Does it matter which version is true when the result is the same? She's gone, Dominic, and you're still here, haunting Venice like a ghost." Her words followed him home that night, echoing in his mind as he walked the moonlit streets. Was that what he had become? A ghost trapped between what was and what might have been? In the months that followed, more women entered Dominic's life. Francesca, the widowed countess who commissioned a summer villa on the mainland. Beatrice, the talented violinist who performed at the Teatro San Lorenzo's opening season. Vittoria, the American heiress, vacationing in Venice, who pursued him with flattering determination. Each was beautiful in her own way. Each offered companionship, passion, the chance to move forward. With each, the pattern repeated. Initial interest would spark in Dominic, a flicker of hope that perhaps this time he could feel something real again. But inevitably, as intimacy approached, all he could see was Serafina's face. All he could feel was the ghost of her touch. His body might respond, but his heart remained locked away, a prisoner of memory. "You need to leave Venice," Alessandro told him after Vittoria's tearful departure. "This city is killing you slowly. There's talk of a major project in Vienna, a new opera house. I've recommended you." "I can't leave," Dominic said simply. "Because of her?" "Dominic, it's been over 2 years. If she were coming back—" "It's not about that," Dominic interrupted, though they both knew it was a lie. "I have commitments here, the Contessa's pavilion, the restoration of the Eastern dockyards." Alessandro didn't press the point, but concern shadowed his eyes. That night, alone in his apartment, the same one where he and Serafina had shared their one perfect night, Dominic faced the truth he had been avoiding. He was living half a life, suspended between hope and grief. As dawn broke over the lagoon, Dominic made a decision. He couldn't continue this way, not for himself, not for his work, and not for the memory of what he and Serafina had shared. She would not want this for him, this pale imitation of living. He removed the emerald ring from the drawer where he kept it, turning it in the morning light. Then, carefully, he placed it in a small wooden box carved with their initials and locked it away in his safe. Not forgotten, never forgotten, but no longer a weight around his neck. That same day, he accepted the commission in Vienna. "It's the right decision," Alessandro said, relief evident in his voice. "A fresh start." "Not a fresh start," Dominic corrected him. "Just the next chapter." As he packed his belongings, Dominic came across the sketch Serafina had made in his studio, a perfect rendering of the two of them standing on a terrace, Venice spread out before them. He had kept it hidden away, unable to look at it without pain. Now he framed it and placed it on his desk, a reminder not of what he had lost, but of what he had been fortunate enough to experience, however briefly. Vienna would not make him forget. Nothing could do that. but perhaps it would help him remember how to live again, how to create beauty from pain, how to honor what he and Serafina had shared by becoming the man she had seen in him. As his gondola pulled away from the dock for the last time, Dominic gazed back at the Venice skyline, at the buildings he had restored, the theater he had created, the city that had witnessed both his greatest joy and deepest sorrow. "Addio, amore mio," he whispered to the wind, "until we meet again." Chapter 5. The Offered Engagement. 5 years had passed since Serafina vanished from Dominic's life. Vienna had welcomed him with open arms, and his work there had flourished beyond even Alessandro's optimistic predictions. The opera house renovation had led to commissions throughout the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Palaces, museums, private villas for the nobility, each more prestigious than the last. His name was spoken with reverence in architectural circles across Europe, yet success had not filled the void in his heart. "You've outdone yourself, Valente," Prince Metternich said as they stood in the newly completed west wing of his country estate. "The harmony between the original structure and your additions is remarkable." "Thank you, Your Highness," Dominic replied with the practiced smile he had perfected over the years. "The original architect left such strong foundations. I merely built upon his vision." "False modesty doesn't suit you," the prince chuckled. "Now you must join us for the weekend. My niece Alessandra arrives from Florence tomorrow, and she has expressed great interest in meeting the brilliant Italian architect who has captivated Vienna." Dominic suppressed a sigh. In 5 years, he had become adept at deflecting the matchmaking attempts of well-meaning patrons. "You're too kind, but I must return to the city. The Emperor's museum project—" "Can wait 2 days," the prince interrupted firmly. "I insist, Valente. Besides, Alessandra's father is Count Medici. Their family is renovating 3 historic properties in Florence. Meeting his daughter could prove professionally advantageous." The implication was clear. Refusing would be both impolite and imprudent. Dominic nodded his acceptance, already planning his escape after the minimum stay courtesy would allow. Alessandra Medici, however, defied his expectations. Unlike the vapid socialites he'd been introduced to at countless soirees, she was genuinely knowledgeable about architecture, having studied art history in Rome. Their first conversation over dinner stretched late into the evening, ranging from Palladio's influence to the merits of different marble quarries. "You're not what I expected, Signorina Medici," Dominic admitted as they walked through the moonlit gardens after dinner. "Let me guess," she smiled wryly. "You expected another nobleman's daughter seeking an accomplished husband to adorn her salon?" "Something like that," he conceded. "And you're not what I expected either, Signor Valente. I thought you'd be older, more pompous. Your modesty is refreshing in a man of your reputation." Their weekend extended to a week as the prince, seeing the rapport between them, manufactured reasons for Dominic to remain. Against his better judgment, Dominic found himself enjoying Alessandra's company. She was beautiful in a classical way, with honey-colored hair and intelligent blue eyes that missed nothing. Her wit was sharp, her laughter genuine. For the first time in years, Dominic felt something stir within him. Not love, but perhaps its distant cousin. Possibility. When their paths crossed again in Vienna a month later, it seemed natural to offer to show her the city. Their outings became regular, their friendship deepening with each meeting. Alessandra never pressed for more, respecting the boundaries Dominic unconsciously established. She never questioned why he sometimes fell silent mid-conversation, his eyes distant, or why he avoided certain parts of the city that reminded him too much of Venice. Alessandro, visiting from Italy, observed their interactions with hopeful interest. "She's good for you," he remarked after meeting Alessandra. "I haven't seen you smile like that since—" "Don't," Dominic cut him off. "Alessandra is a friend, nothing more." But she could be, Alessandro persisted. I see how she looks at you when you're not watching, and I see how you're starting to look at her too. It's not that simple. It could be if you allowed it. The pressure to allow it mounted from all sides as autumn turned to winter. Prince Metternich made no secret of his approval. Count Medici, visiting his daughter in Vienna, invited Dominic to private family dinners. Even the Empress commented on what a handsome couple they made at the winter ball. On the 5th anniversary of Serafina's disappearance, Dominic shut himself in his apartment with a bottle of grappa, staring at her sketch until the lines blurred. The next morning, bleary-eyed and hollow, he made a decision. Perhaps it was time to truly let go. Serafina would always own a piece of his soul, but maybe, just maybe, there was room for someone else as well. He sent a letter to Florence, formally requesting Count Medici's permission to court Alessandra. The Count's enthusiastic approval arrived by express messenger, along with an invitation to spend Christmas at the Medici estate outside Florence. The speed and warmth of the response should have pleased Dominic. Instead, it filled him with a nameless dread. Still, he packed his bags and boarded the train south, telling himself this was the right path forward. Alessandra met him at the station, her face glowing with happiness that made her truly beautiful. "Father is beside himself with excitement," she confided as their carriage rolled through the Tuscan countryside. "He's invited half of Florence for the Christmas Eve dinner." "That seems excessive for a simple visit," Dominic replied carefully. Alessandra's cheeks colored slightly. "Well, perhaps he's anticipating a certain announcement. The timing is rather perfect, don't you think? Christmas Eve, family gathered, the perfect romantic setting." The implication hung between them. Dominic said nothing, but his silence was taken as confirmation. By the time they reached the Medici villa, nestled among cypress trees and olive groves, it seemed the entire household was preparing for an engagement, not merely a Christmas celebration. The Count himself greeted Dominic with a warm embrace. "My boy! Welcome, welcome. Come, we must talk before dinner." He led Dominic to his study, where ancient maps and family portraits covered wood-paneled walls. After pouring 2 generous glasses of aged Brunello, he settled into a leather chair opposite Dominic. "I'll come straight to the point," he said, his voice warm but businesslike. "Your interest in my daughter honors our family. The Medicis have always valued artistic genius, and you, Valenti, are the architectural genius of your generation." "You're too kind, sir." "No, I'm a practical man who recognizes quality. Now, to matters at hand, I've had papers drawn up." He gestured to documents on his desk. "A generous dowry, of course. Additionally, I'm prepared to commission you for the renovation of our ancestral palazzo in Florence, a project that would secure your reputation in Italy for decades to come." Dominic stared at the papers, a cold weight settling in his stomach. This was moving too quickly, too formally, too much like a business transaction rather than a matter of the heart. "Overwhelmed," the Count misinterpreted his silence. "Understandable, but I assure you everything is in order. I've even spoken with the Cardinal about a spring wedding at the Duomo. Alessandra has always dreamed of being married there." "Count Medici," Dominic began carefully, "while I'm deeply honored by your generosity, I haven't yet formally proposed to your daughter." The Count waved his hand dismissively. "A formality, my boy. Your letter made your intentions clear, and Alessandra's acceptance is a foregone conclusion. She's been half in love with you since Vienna." Half in love. The phrase echoed in Dominic's mind. Wasn't that what he was offering her? Half his heart, half his soul, while the other half remained locked away in a past he couldn't escape? The Christmas Eve dinner was everything Alessandra had described. Lavish, crowded with Florentine nobility, and heavy with expectation. Dominic felt dozens of eyes on him as he escorted Alessandra to their seats at the head table. The velvet box in his pocket, containing a sapphire ring hastily purchased in Vienna, seemed to burn against his thigh. This was the sensible path. Alessandra was kind, intelligent, from an excellent family. They shared interests and enjoyed each other's company. Many successful marriages had been built on less. And yet, as the meal progressed toward dessert, the moment the Count had unsubtly suggested would be perfect for a proposal, Dominic felt a growing panic. Conversation flowed around him, but he barely heard it. Alessandra placed her hand over his, concern in her eyes. "Are you well?" she whispered. "You've gone pale." "Forgive me," he said, standing abruptly. "I need a moment of air." He strode from the dining room, ignoring the curious murmurs that followed him, and found his way to a balcony overlooking the moonlit gardens. The winter air bit into his lungs, clearing his head of the stifling atmosphere inside. "Dominic?" Alessandra's voice came from behind him. "What's wrong?" He turned to face her, knowing he owed her honesty. "I can't do this, Alessandra. I'm sorry." Her face fell, but there was more understanding than surprise in her expression. "It's her, isn't it? The Venetian woman everyone whispers about." Dominic nodded. "I thought I could move forward. I wanted to. You deserve someone who can give you their whole heart, and I cannot," she finished for him. "I've always known that, I think. I saw it in your eyes the first time we met. I just hoped, with time—" "You are extraordinary," Dominic said softly. "Any man would be fortunate to have your love. But I would be living a lie, and eventually, that lie would destroy us both." Alessandra stepped closer, reaching up to touch his cheek. "Do you know the strangest part? I think this is why I fell in love with you, this uncompromising honesty, this capacity for such profound feeling. I hope someday someone loves me with even half the devotion you still hold for her." She kissed his cheek gently, then stepped back. "I'll tell Father you've been called away on urgent business. It will be easier that way." "Alessandra." "Go, Dominic. Find your ghost, or find peace. Either way, don't settle for half a life, not even with me." As he packed his bags in the guest room, Dominic felt both shame and relief. He had nearly made a terrible mistake. Alessandra deserved better than to be consolation for a love he couldn't forget. Dawn found him on a train bound for Naples, the engagement ring left behind with a note of apology and gratitude. He had no clear destination in mind, only the certainty that he couldn't continue pretending his heart was free to give. Perhaps it was time to stop running from Serafina's memory and instead run toward whatever closure he might find. In his pocket he carried the small worn sketch she had made of the two of them. His talisman, his compass pointing always toward the love he had lost, but never forgotten. Chapter 6. The Unfinished Symphony. Florence embraced Dominic with golden sunlight and the promise of renewal. 6 years had passed since he last saw Serafina, and after the disastrous almost engagement to Alessandra, he had drifted across Europe, taking commissions that interested him but never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. London, Paris, Madrid. Each city offered distraction but no lasting peace. When the letter arrived from the Florentine Arts Council, inviting him to oversee the restoration of the historic Teatro dell'Aurora, Dominic nearly declined. He had avoided Italy since leaving Venice, fearing the memories that might surface on familiar soil. Yet something about this project called to him. The ancient theater, nearly destroyed by fire decades earlier, had lain dormant like a sleeping beauty awaiting resurrection. "Like you," Alessandro said bluntly when Dominic shared the commission with him. "A dead building for a man half alive. Perhaps you'll resurrect each other." Dominic had long since stopped protesting his friend's assessment of his emotional state. They both knew the truth. Since leaving the Medici villa 3 years earlier, he had existed rather than lived, pouring what passion remained in him into his work. The Teatro dell'Aurora had been magnificent in its day, a jewel-box theater known for perfect acoustics and revolutionary design. As Dominic stood in its charred skeleton, sunlight streaming through holes in the roof, he felt a stirring of something he hadn't experienced in years. Creative fire. She can be saved, he told the Arts Council chairman, running his hands along blackened walls that still held the memory of music. Not merely restored, but reborn. For the first time since leaving Venice, Dominic found himself fully engaged in a project, working from dawn until dusk and often through the night. He slept on a cot in what would become the theater's office, surrounded by blueprints and samples of marble and gilding. Florence's finest artisans were enlisted, woodcarvers, fresco painters, master plasterers, each catching fire from Dominic's vision. "You've become obsessed," Alessandro observed during one of his visits from Venice. "It's good to see, even if it's only with a building." "Not just any building," Dominic replied, eyes bright with exhaustion and inspiration. "This theater has a soul. Can't you feel it?" Alessandro studied his friend with a mixture of concern and hope. "I feel something, certainly. A change in you. This place is bringing you back to life." Perhaps it was. As spring turned to summer and summer to autumn, the theater transformed under Dominic's guidance. The charred husk gave way to emerging beauty, soaring ceilings adorned with frescoes of Apollo and the Muses, tiers of boxes with intricate golden detailing, red velvet seats soft as a lover's embrace. Dominic poured himself into every detail. The stage was designed to project even a whisper to the farthest seat. The lighting system, revolutionary for its time, could transform the space from bright daylight to the intimate glow of a sunset. But it was the main foyer that became his masterpiece, a sweeping space of marble and gold, crowned by a domed ceiling painted with scenes from Italian opera. "We need a name for the central figure," said Matteo, the fresco artist, pointing to the empty face of the muse at the dome's center. "Traditionally, it would be Terpsichore, but I thought perhaps someone with more personal significance." Dominic looked up at the blank face surrounded by swirling golds and blues. Without conscious thought, he replied, "Serafina. Her name is Serafina." Matteo, who had worked with Dominic long enough to sense the weight of the name, simply nodded. "Serafina it shall be." As winter approached and the theater neared completion, Florence buzzed with anticipation. The reopening was scheduled for New Year's Eve, a rebirth to welcome the coming year. Italy's most celebrated soprano, Maria Bellini, would perform selected arias, accompanied by Florence's finest orchestra. "You've created a masterpiece," the council chairman told Dominic as they toured the nearly finished theater. "The city is forever in your debt." "The building created itself," Dominic replied. "I merely helped it remember what it was meant to be." On the night of the grand reopening, Florence's elite gathered in their finest attire. Women in silk and jewels, men in formal black, ascended the marble steps into Dominic's creation. Gasps of wonder echoed through the foyer as they beheld the magnificent space, eyes drawn upward to the dome where Serafina, her face now bearing a haunting resemblance to the woman Dominic had loved, gazed down with serene grace. Dominic himself stood apart from the crowd, watching from a shadowed corner. He wore formal attire as befitted the occasion, but his expression remained distant, as if not fully present in the moment of his triumph. Alessandro found him there as the audience began moving toward the auditorium. "You should be greeting your admirers, not hiding in corners." "I'm not hiding," Dominic said, echoing a conversation they'd had years before in Venice. "I'm observing." "Well, observe from the architect's box. The council insists." Alessandro took his arm, guiding him through the crowd. "This is your night, Dominic. Try to be present for it." The architect's box, positioned perfectly to showcase both the stage and the auditorium's sweeping design, awaited him with a bottle of champagne and a small gathering of council members. Dominic accepted their praise with practiced grace, his eyes continuously drawn to the details of his creation, the way light played across gilded surfaces, the perfect curve of the proscenium arch, the subtle symbolism incorporated into every decorative element. As the house lights dimmed and the orchestra began tuning, a strange peace settled over him. Whatever else had happened in his life, he had created this, a space of beauty and harmony that would outlive him, that would bring joy to generations yet unborn. If this was to be his legacy, perhaps it was enough. The conductor raised his baton, and the first notes of the overture filled the theater. Dominic closed his eyes, letting the music wash over him. Mozart's Don Giovanni, a fitting choice to inaugurate a resurrected theater. The tale of a man who lived for passion, heedless of consequences. When Maria Bellini took the stage for Donna Anna's aria, her powerful soprano soaring to the rafters, Dominic opened his eyes and froze. The melody, it couldn't be. The aria Non mi dire had been playing the night he first danced with Serafina at the Palazzo Contarini. The same haunting notes, the same plaintive plea for understanding and remembrance. Of all the pieces in the operatic canon, how had they chosen this one? Dominic gripped the railing of the box, suddenly unable to breathe. Memories flooded back with brutal clarity. Serafina in his arms, the scent of her perfume, the way her eyes had shimmered in the candlelight on their night together. "Dominic?" Alessandro whispered, noticing his distress. "What's wrong?" But Dominic couldn't answer. The music had transported him back 6 years, reopening wounds he had thought, if not healed, at least scarred over. He listened, transfixed, as Maria Bellini's voice wove the familiar melody, each note cutting deeper than the last. When the aria ended and applause erupted around him, Dominic stood abruptly. "I need air," he mumbled, pushing past startled council members to exit the box. He found himself in a service corridor, leaning against the wall, heart pounding. It was merely coincidence, he told himself. An unfortunate selection that had caught him off guard. Nothing more. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had occurred, as if the universe itself had conspired to remind him that his masterpiece, like his heart, remained incomplete. "Signor Valente," a soft voice interrupted his thoughts. He turned to find a young stagehand watching him with concern. "Are you unwell, sir?" "I'm fine," Dominic assured her, straightening his posture. "Just overwhelmed by the acoustics." The girl smiled. "They're magnificent. Everyone says you've created magic here." She hesitated, then added, "There's a woman asking about you." "In the lobby?" "A woman?" "Yes, sir. Elegant, dark-haired. She seemed eager to speak with you." For one wild moment, hope flared in Dominic's chest. But reason quickly extinguished it. Dozens of women would be seeking out the architect tonight. Patrons, admirers, society hostesses eager to secure his presence at their salons. "Did she give a name?" he asked anyway. The girl shook her head. "No, sir, but she mentioned Venice. Said you might remember her from there." Venice. The word alone was enough to quicken his pulse. "Where is she now?" "By the grand staircase, last I saw." Dominic moved through the service corridors that honeycombed the theater, emerging into the less crowded upper lobby. From here he could see down to the grand staircase where a few late arrivals still made their way into the auditorium. His eyes scanned the crowd, searching for a familiar silhouette, a glimpse of dark curls. There, a woman in midnight blue, her back to him, speaking with one of the ushers. Something in the graceful tilt of her head, the elegant line of her neck. She turned, and disappointment crashed through him. Not Serafina. This woman was perhaps 10 years older, her features similar but distinctly different. As the usher pointed in his direction, the woman looked up and met his gaze. After a moment's hesitation, she began ascending the stairs toward him. "Signor Valente," she said when she reached him, her voice carrying a faint Venetian accent. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," he replied automatically. "Have we met?" "No," she smiled slightly. "But I believe you knew my cousin, Serafina Castellano." The name, spoken aloud by a stranger after so many years, hit Dominic like a physical blow. "You're related to Serafina?" "Lucia Castellano." She extended her hand. "I've wanted to meet you for some time." Dominic led her to a quiet alcove, away from curious eyes. "You said knew. Is she—" He couldn't finish the question. "No, no," Lucia assured him quickly. "As far as I know, Serafina is quite well, but we've been estranged for many years. Family politics." Her expression darkened briefly. "Uncle Giuseppe's doing—" "Do you know where she is?" Dominic asked, struggling to keep his voice steady. Lucia hesitated. "I have heard rumors. Nothing certain. But I didn't seek you out to give you empty hope, Signor Valente." "Then why are you here?" "Because I was there that summer. I saw how she looked at you, how she spoke of you. Whatever happened after ... She shook her head. "Serafina wouldn't have left willingly. I've always believed that." "As have I," Dominic said quietly. "Then we understand each other." Lucia reached into her evening bag and withdrew a small envelope. "This arrived at my home in Rome 3 years ago. No return address, no note. Just this." She handed him the envelope. Inside was a newspaper clipping, a review of Dominic's Vienna Opera House renovation, and a pressed flower. A forget-me-not. "It might mean nothing," Lucia said, "but I thought you should have it." Dominic stared at the delicate blue flower, his heart thundering in his chest. A message? A sign? After 6 years of silence, it seemed impossibly tenuous, and yet it was the first tangible connection to Serafina since she vanished. "Thank you," he said, carefully returning the flower to its envelope. "There's one more thing," Lucia added hesitantly. "A rumor, nothing more. My brother travels extensively for business. Last year, in Naples, he thought he glimpsed Serafina in a small coastal town nearby. By the time he returned to confirm, there was no trace of her." "Naples," Dominic repeated. "The opposite end of Italy from Venice. A place where the Castellano name might carry less weight. As I said, merely a rumor." Lucia glanced toward the auditorium doors. "I should return to my seat. The intermission will begin soon." As she turned to leave, Dominic called after her. "Why now?" "After all these years." Lucia paused, something like guilt crossing her features. "Because I was a coward before. Because I should have spoken years ago when I suspected my uncle's hand in her disappearance. And because—" she gestured toward the dome above them, "because you put her face in the heavens, Signor Valente. Only a man who truly loved her would do that." After she had gone, Dominic remained in the alcove, the envelope clutched in his hand like a talisman. The theater he had restored with such devotion suddenly felt incomplete, a magnificent shell awaiting the soul that would make it truly alive. As the intermission began and patrons spilled into the lobby, Dominic slipped away, avoiding Alessandro's searching gaze. He needed solitude, needed to think. The forget-me-not seemed to burn in his pocket, a tiny flame rekindling a fire he had thought extinguished. Naples, a coastal town, a glimpse, a rumor, a pressed flower. It was almost nothing. And yet it was more than he had had in 6 years of searching. Standing on the theater's rooftop terrace, Florence spread before him like a golden carpet, Dominic made a decision. The Teatro dell'Aurora was finished. His work here was complete. But his own story, the story of his heart, remained unresolved. It was time to follow this fragile thread wherever it might lead. Time to seek either reunion or final closure. Time to find Serafina, or at least the truth of what had happened to her. As the bells of the Duomo rang out across Florence, marking the turn of the year, Dominic gazed up at the stars, making a silent vow. This would be the year he found answers. One way or another, the symphony of his life would find its resolution. Chapter 7. Rumors from across the sea. The coastal road from Naples wound like a ribbon along the Mediterranean, each turn revealing vistas of breathtaking beauty. 8 years had passed since Serafina disappeared, and the last 2 had been consumed by Dominic's relentless search. Lucia Castellano's whispered rumors had led him first to Naples, where he'd spent months searching in vain. He widened his quest to the surrounding coastal towns, Sorrento, Positano, Amalfi, each yielding nothing but sympathetic smiles and shaking heads. Alessandro worried openly about his friend's obsession. "You're chasing a ghost," he had written. "Resume your life before it's too late." But Dominic couldn't stop. The search had become his life. His rented carriage carried him toward Ravello, a small town perched high above the sea. "Beautiful, no," his driver commented, "like something from a dream." "How large is Ravello?" Dominic asked. "Small, signore. A few thousand souls. Everyone knows everyone." Perfect for his purposes. Small towns held fewer secrets. The Albergo del Mare was modest but clean, its terrace offering sweeping views of the coastline. As Dominic settled with a glass of wine, he studied his fellow patrons. "First time in Ravello?" The innkeeper placed a small plate of olives beside Dominic's wine. "I'm an architect," Dominic replied with a practiced smile. "I'm considering a small villa in the area." By the time he finished his wine, he had established himself as a professional, with legitimate reasons for asking questions. "There's a small bookshop in the square," the innkeeper suggested. "Old Signora Bianchi is a scholar of local history." The bookshop was cramped and dusty. At the rear, an elderly woman with sharp eyes sat behind an antique desk. "Signora Bianchi?" Dominic inquired. "Who else would I be?" she replied with acerbic wit. "What can I do for you, young man?" "I'm interested in local architecture," Dominic began, but her piercing gaze made him hesitate. "I'm also looking for someone, a woman who might have come to this area several years ago. A lost love, perhaps? You have that haunted look about you." "Yes," Dominic admitted. "She disappeared 8 years ago. I've been searching ever since." "What's her name, this vanished love of yours?" "Serafina Castellano, though she might be using another name now." Signora Bianchi's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. "I know many people," she replied evasively. "Many come here seeking new beginnings, new identities." "Please," Dominic leaned forward. "Any information, no matter how small." The old woman sighed, then reached for a ledger. "I keep records of all my customers. About 7 years ago, a young woman began ordering books from me. Philosophy, architecture, poetry, unusual choices for these parts." "Serafina was educated at the Sorbonne," Dominic said quietly. "She loved poetry." "This woman never gave her real name. She called herself—" Signora Bianchi paused, consulting her ledger. "Sofia Navarro. Dark hair, green eyes, spoke with an educated northern accent. She tried to hide. She looked up. Sound familiar?" Dominic felt dizzy with hope. "Very. Sofia Navarro. Where can I find her?" "Sofia hasn't been to my shop in nearly 2 years. She lived in Atrani, the next town along the coast." The old woman's expression grew serious. "But before you rush off, you should know. She wasn't alone. She was married. No ring on her finger, but there were children, twin boys." The world seemed to tilt beneath Dominic's feet. Children, twin boys. They would be 7, nearly 8 years old now, born 9 months after. "How old?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Young, 5 or 6 when I last saw them. Beautiful children, dark hair, hazel eyes, like his own." Outside, Dominic instructed his driver. Atrani, as quickly as possible. The smaller town of Atrani nestled in a narrow valley just around the coastal bend from Amalfi. Dominic approached a woman drawing water from a fountain. "Excuse me, Signora, I'm looking for Sofia Navarro." "Sophia moved away almost 2 years ago," the woman said. "Such a shame. Her boys loved it here, but after her grandmother died, there was nothing to keep her. Do you know where she went?" "She kept to herself, pretty but private. Some said she was hiding from someone." She gave Dominic a shrewd look. "You, perhaps?" "No," he said quickly. "We lost touch many years ago." "Try Maiori, perhaps. I heard her mention it once." For 2 months, Dominic combed the coastline, following whispers and half-remembered sightings. In a small cafe in Satara, he overheard a conversation between local women. "Did you hear? Sophia's boys won the school prize in Vietri. Both of them. They're not staying in Vietri, I heard, moving to the teacher's cottage outside town now that old Signor Rossi has passed. Vietri sul Mare, the last town along the Amalfi coast before Salerno, less than an hour's journey away." That night, Dominic wrote to Alessandro. "I found her. After 8 years, I finally found her. And Alessandro, I have sons. Twin boys." As he sealed the letter, thunder rumbled in the distance. This storm seemed particularly fitting, a tempest to match the emotions churning within him. Tomorrow he would go to Vietri. Tomorrow, after 8 years of searching, he would finally see Serafina again and meet his sons. Sleep came easier that night, lulled by the rhythm of the gathering storm and the certainty that his long journey was nearing its end. Chapter 8. The Rainfall Reunion. Dawn broke over Vietri sul Mare with ominous gray skies and distant rumbles of thunder. Dominic had barely slept, his mind racing with questions and possibilities. After a hurried breakfast, he hired a carriage to take him to the small schoolhouse on the outskirts of town. "They'll be closing early today," the driver commented, eyeing the darkening clouds. "Bad storm coming in from the sea." The schoolhouse was a modest stone building with a red-tiled roof. Children's artwork decorated the windows, bright splashes of color against weathered walls. As the carriage pulled up, the door opened and a stream of children emerged, laughing and calling to one another as they hurried home ahead of the coming storm. Dominic's eyes scanned their faces frantically, searching for familiar features. His eyes, Serafina's smile, but the children dispersed quickly, running toward waiting parents or racing down the coastal path toward town. A middle-aged woman appeared in the doorway. "You've just missed them," she told Dominic after he inquired. "Signora Navarro collected the boys a few minutes ago." She pointed toward a dirt path winding up into the hills. "The old teacher's cottage, just past the olive grove on the north road, about 20 minutes' walk." Dominic set off immediately, dismissing the carriage. The path climbed steeply, offering glimpses of the turbulent sea below. Wind whipped through olive trees as fat raindrops began to fall, spattering the dusty path. By the time the cottage came into view, a simple whitewashed structure nestled among cypress trees, the sporadic drops had become a steady downpour. Dominic paused at the gate, suddenly paralyzed by uncertainty. 8 years of searching had led to this moment. What if she rejected him? What if the children wanted nothing to do with him? Before he could resolve his inner conflict, the cottage door opened. A woman stepped onto the covered porch, her silhouette immediately achingly familiar. Serafina. 2 small figures darted out beside her, laughing as they held out their hands to catch raindrops. Twin boys with dark curls and slender builds. His sons. One of the boys spotted him first, tugging at his mother's skirt and pointing. Serafina turned, shielding her eyes against the rain. For a timeless moment, she stared at the figure by her gate, unmoving, unbelieving. Dominic? Her voice carried to him on the wind, a whisper and a shout all at once. Something broke inside him at the sound of his name on her lips. 8 years of restraint shattered in an instant. He pushed through the gate and strode up the path, heedless of the rain soaking him to the skin. "Mama?" One of the boys pressed against Serafina's side, suddenly shy. "Who is that man?" The other twin gripped his mother's skirt, eyes wide with apprehension. "Is he the one from the photographs? The one you cry about?" Serafina couldn't seem to find her voice as Dominic approached, stopping just short of the porch steps. Rain streamed down his face, mingling with tears he made no effort to hide. 8 years, he said, his voice raw with emotion. 8 years I've searched for you. Serafina's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide and glistening. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. But there was no conviction in her words, only a reflexive fear. "Who else would I be?" Dominic countered, gesturing toward the boys. "These are my sons, aren't they?" The twins exchanged startled glances, then looked up at their mother with questioning eyes. "Mama," the bolder one whispered, "is he our papa? The architect?" Serafina's composure finally broke, a sob escaping her as she nodded. "Yes," she admitted, her voice barely audible above the rain. "He's your father. They're yours, Dominic." The confirmation, though expected, hit Dominic with physical force. He staggered slightly, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had been kept from him. 8 years of his children's lives, first steps, first words, first days of school, all irrevocably lost. "Why?" he demanded, anger and grief mingling in the single word. "Why would you keep them from me?" The boys moved closer to their mother, sensing her distress. The protective instinct in their posture broke Dominic's heart anew. To them he was a stranger, a threat. "You should come inside," Serafina said finally. "This isn't a conversation for the rain." The cottage interior was modest but welcoming, whitewashed walls adorned with children's drawings, shelves overflowing with books, a fire crackling in the small hearth. "Lorenzo Matteo," Serafina addressed the twins gently. "This is Dominic Valente. He's your father." The boys stared at him with identical expressions of wonder and uncertainty. They were beautiful children, slender and fine-boned like their mother, but with Dominic's hazel eyes and the same slight cleft in their chins. "You're the architect," said one of them. Lorenzo, Dominic guessed from the more confident bearing. "Mama has books about your buildings." "She told us you build beautiful things," added Matteo, the quieter one. "But she said you lived far away and couldn't be with us." Dominic knelt to their level, his heart so full it threatened to burst. "I would have been with you if I'd known," he said softly. "I've been looking for you and your mother for a very long time." After the boys reluctantly departed to their room, a heavy silence fell between the adults. Serafina moved mechanically, taking Dominic's wet coat, pouring him a glass of wine, keeping physical distance between them. "They're incredible," Dominic said finally. "Perfect. So intelligent. So ours." "They are," Serafina agreed. "Lorenzo is the dreamer, always designing fanciful structures with his blocks. Matteo is more practical. He makes sure the foundations are solid." "Like their parents were," Dominic said softly. "I had no choice," she whispered in response to his earlier question. "Not when it means protecting my children, our children, from a man who would destroy anything that threatened his plans." "What are you talking about?" Dominic asked, bewildered. "My father told me you'd been sent to Sicily, that you were engaged to Count Ricci. I knew he was lying, but—" "Of course he lied," Serafina interrupted bitterly. When I discovered I was pregnant the morning after our night together, I knew immediately what he would do. Force you to marry me? I would have proposed on the spot if I'd known. No, Serafina shook her head, pain etched in every line of her face. He would have made the pregnancy disappear, and possibly you along with it. Chapter 9. Confrontation in the Rain. The storm intensified outside the small cottage, matching the emotional tempest within. Dominic and Serafina stood mere feet apart, yet the distance between them felt both vast and infinitesimal. 8 years of separation, of longing and pain, distilled into this single moment. They look like you, Serafina said softly, breaking the charged silence. Everyone comments on it. Lorenzo has your determination, Matteo your sensitivity. Both inherited your gift for seeing the beauty in structures. But they have your eyes, Dominic replied, the same shade of green, and your smile. He paused, swallowing hard. I've missed that smile for 8 years. Serafina's composure wavered. I never thought I'd see you again, she whispered. I convinced myself it was better that way. Safer. For whom? Dominic's voice hardened slightly. Not for me. These years without you have been a half-life, Serafina, a shadow existence. For our sons, she countered, lifting her chin in a gesture of defiance he remembered well. Everything I've done has been to protect them. From a threat that no longer exists, Giuseppe has been dead for years. His influence lingered, his business partners, his allies. I couldn't be certain they wouldn't fulfill his wishes even after his death. Serafina moved to the window, staring out at the rain-lashed landscape. Besides, what would I have said after so much time had passed? Hello, Dominic. Remember me? The woman who disappeared without a word. By the way, here are your sons. Yes, Dominic said simply. Exactly that. At any time, in any place, under any circumstances, I would have welcomed you back without hesitation. A flash of lightning illuminated Serafina's face, revealing an expression of such profound longing that it stole Dominic's breath. How can you still look at me that way? After everything? How could I not? He took a step toward her. Do you think love like ours simply disappears, that what we shared could ever be forgotten? Before she could answer, a small voice interrupted from the doorway. Mama, are you crying? They turned to find Lorenzo and Matteo watching them, identical expressions of concern on their young faces. Serafina quickly wiped her eyes. I'm fine, darlings. Just remembering. The boys approached cautiously, their gazes alternating between their mother and the stranger, who was suddenly, impossibly, their father. Dominic knelt to their level, his heart racing. I would like to know you both, he said gently. If that's all right. The twins exchanged one of those silent communications unique to siblings so closely bonded. Lorenzo, ever the spokesperson, nodded. Mama has a box of pictures of you. She looks at them sometimes when she thinks we're sleeping. Serafina made a small sound of embarrassment, but Matteo continued where his brother left off. She told us you build beautiful things that touch the sky. She said we have your hands. He held out his own small hands for inspection. Dominic fought back tears as he compared their slender fingers with his own. Yes, he managed to say. Artists' hands, builders' hands. Can you teach us to build things? Lorenzo asked. Real buildings, not just with blocks? I would like nothing more, Dominic replied, his voice rough with emotion. For the next hour, a fragile peace settled over the cottage. The boys brought out their drawings and wooden block constructions, eager to show their father their creations. Dominic praised their work with genuine admiration, recognizing in their designs the same intuitive understanding of form and function that had guided his own childhood experiments. Serafina watched from a slight distance, her expression a complex mixture of joy and trepidation. When at last the twins began to yawn, she gently instructed them to prepare for bed. "Will you still be here tomorrow?" Matteo asked Dominic, his voice small and uncertain. The question hung in the air, laden with implications. Dominic looked to Serafina, unwilling to make promises he might not be allowed to keep. "Your father will be here," she answered for him, her eyes meeting his across the room. "We have much to discuss, but he's found us now, and he won't disappear." After she had tucked the boys into bed, Serafina returned to find Dominic standing by the fire, studying a sketch on the mantelpiece, one of her drawings of the Venice skyline rendered from memory. "You kept drawing," he observed. "It connected me to you," she admitted quietly, keeping her distance. "When I sketched, I could almost feel you guiding my hand, as you did that summer in Venice." "Serafina." Dominic turned to face her fully. "What happens now?" The simple question encompassed worlds of possibility, of hope and fear. Serafina sank into a chair, suddenly looking exhausted. "I don't know," she confessed. "For 8 years, my entire existence has been defined by hiding, by creating this safe haven for our sons. And now you're here, and everything I built feels like it's shifting beneath my feet." "I won't disrupt their lives," Dominic promised. "Whatever happens between us, I want only what's best for Lorenzo and Matteo." "And what is that?" Serafina challenged softly. "They've never known a father. Their world is small but secure. How do we suddenly expand it without causing harm?" "With truth," Dominic said. "With love. The same love that created them." Serafina's gaze dropped to her hands. "Love isn't always enough. It was enough to keep me searching for 8 years." Dominic knelt before her chair, close but not touching. "It was enough for you to preserve their connection to me through stories and pictures, even when you thought we'd never meet." The rain had softened to a gentle patter against the windows. The worst of the storm passed. In the relative quiet, Serafina's next words fell like stones into still water. "I saw your engagement announcement," she said, 3 years ago, in a newspaper from Florence, to Alessandra Medici." Dominic rocked back on his heels, surprised. "A brief entanglement. It ended before it truly began." "Because of me?" The question held a note of vulnerability that pierced his heart. "Because of us," he corrected gently. "I couldn't offer her what I had already given to you, my whole heart." Serafina looked up at last, her eyes swimming with unshed tears. "So much time lost," she whispered. "So many moments we can never recover." "Then let's not waste any more," Dominic urged, finally allowing himself to take her hands in his. "Serafina, I don't care about the past. I care about now, about tomorrow, about building a future with you and our sons." "It's not that simple," she protested weakly. "We're different people now. I'm not the carefree girl you knew in Venice. And you've built a life, a career spanning continents." "A hollow life," Dominic countered. "Buildings without soul, success without joy." He tightened his grip on her hands. "Everything I've created since you left has been a monument to absence, to loss." A tear slipped down Serafina's cheek. "I never meant to cause you such pain." "I know." Dominic reached up to brush the tear away, his fingers lingering on her skin. "You did what you thought was necessary to protect our children. I cannot fault your courage, your sacrifice. But Serafina," his voice broke, "the danger is past. Your father is gone. It's time to stop running." The touch of his hand on her face seemed to crumble the last of her defenses. With a small, broken sound, Serafina leaned forward until their foreheads touched, the first intimate contact they had shared in 8 years. "I've lived with fear for so long," she confessed, her breath warm against his skin. "I don't know how to release it." "One day at a time," Dominic murmured. "Together." Outside, the storm had passed entirely, leaving in its wake the fresh, clean scent of rain-washed earth. As if responding to the changing weather, something in Serafina's expression cleared, a decision visibly forming. "There's something you should see," she said, rising from her chair. She crossed to a small desk in the corner and retrieved a weathered leather portfolio. "I've kept these all these years. For the boys, I told myself, so they would know their heritage. But perhaps I was keeping them for this moment." Inside the portfolio were drawings, dozens of them. Dominic spreading blueprints on his drafting table in Venice. Dominic laughing on a gondola. And most startling, Dominic holding twin infants, a family portrait from an alternate reality that had never existed. "I drew what might have been," Serafina explained softly. "The life we should have had." "The life we still can have," Dominic corrected, his voice thick with emotion. "Not the same. We can't reclaim those lost years. But something new. Something built on the foundation of what we once shared." Serafina's resistance was crumbling. He could see it in her eyes, feel it in the trembling of her hands as she took the portfolio from him and set it aside. "The boys will have questions," she said, practical concerns momentarily overriding emotion. "About where you've been, about why you're suddenly in their lives." "We'll answer them together," Dominic assured her, with age-appropriate truth. "And your work? Your life in Florence?" "My work can be done anywhere. My commissions will wait." Dominic's voice was firm. Nothing is more important than this, than you, than our sons." The fire had burned low, casting the small room in gentle shadows. In this muted light, Serafina looked both achingly familiar and new, the girl he had loved in Venice transformed by motherhood and hardship into a woman of remarkable strength. "I never stopped loving you," she whispered, the confession seeming to surprise even her. "Even when I convinced myself I would never see you again. Even when I told myself it was better that way. Every time I looked at our sons, I saw you." The words Dominic had longed to hear for 8 years washed over him like a benediction. With exquisite care, as if she might shatter at his touch, he drew her into his arms. She came willingly, her body fitting against his with the same perfect harmony, he remembered. "Tell me again," he murmured against her hair. Serafina pulled back just enough to meet his gaze, her eyes clear and unguarded for the first time since he'd arrived. "I love you, Dominic Valente. I have loved you every day for 8 years, across all the distance and silence between us." "And I love you, Serafina Castellano." Dominic cradled her face between his palms. "In this life and whatever comes after." As their lips met in a kiss 8 years delayed, the last barrier between them dissolved like morning mist. Outside, the clouds parted to reveal a sky filled with stars, witnesses to a reunion that defied time, distance, and the machinations of men who would have kept them apart. Chapter 10: The Dangerous Legacy. Dawn broke over the Amalfi coast, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Dominic stood on the small cottage porch, watching the sun emerge from the sea, his mind still struggling to process all that had happened since his arrival. Inside, Serafina and their sons slept peacefully, exhausted by the emotional storm of the previous day. Their sons. The phrase still sent a jolt of wonder through him. He was a father to 2 remarkable boys who, until yesterday, had not known his face. The weight of those lost years pressed on his heart, even as joy at their reunion lifted it. "You're still here," Serafina's voice came softly from behind him. She joined him at the railing, her hair loose around her shoulders, her eyes still carrying the remnants of sleep. "Part of me feared I'd dreamed it all." "I'm not going anywhere," Dominic assured her, reaching for her hand. "Not without you and the boys." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the fishing boats set out from the harbor below. Finally, Serafina spoke. There's more you need to know. About why I left. About my father. I thought we covered that last night, Dominic said gently. Your father threatened my life, threatened our unborn child. That was only part of it. Serafina's expression darkened. My father's reach was longer, his sins deeper than you know. The Castellano fortune wasn't built merely on shipping. That was the legitimate face of his empire. Dominic turned to face her fully. What are you saying? My father was involved with dangerous men, smuggling, extortion, worse. I didn't understand the extent of it until that last morning in Venice, when I overheard him discussing you, the casual way he spoke of arranging an accident. She shuddered at the memory. I realized then that the father I thought I knew was a fiction. Did you go to the authorities? Serafina's laugh was bitter. The authorities? My father owned half the police in Venice. The other half knew better than to cross him. No, there was no justice to be found there. So you ran, Dominic said quietly. Alone, pregnant, terrified. My brave Serafina. Not brave, she corrected. Desperate. When I left Venice, I didn't go directly to Amalfi. I went to Rome first, to my mother's cousin, the only family member I could trust. She helped me establish a new identity, find a place to live. Sofia Navarro, Dominic murmured. Yes. My mother's maiden name was Navarro. Sofia was simple enough to remember in a moment of panic. She sighed, pushing a strand of hair from her face. I lived in Rome until the twins were born. Afterward, when they were strong enough to travel, we came to Amalfi, to my grandmother's hometown. And you've been here ever since, moving every few years as a precaution. Atrani first, then several other villages along the coast, always modest homes, always keeping to ourselves. Serafina's expression softened. But the boys needed stability, education. They're so bright, Dominic, so curious about everything. I couldn't keep them isolated forever. So you settled here in Vietri. When I heard of my father's death, I thought perhaps it was safe at last. Her voice grew troubled. But then, 3 months ago, I received a letter. Dominic stiffened. From whom? It was unsigned, but it contained details only someone from my father's inner circle would know. It said simply, the debt remains unpaid. The Castellano legacy continues. A threat? I believe so. I nearly fled again, but... She gestured toward the cottage where their son still slept. They're finally settled, making friends, thriving in school. I couldn't bear to uproot them again without absolute certainty of danger. Dominic's jaw tightened as protective instinct surged within him. Who would threaten you after all this time? What debt could possibly remain? My father had many business partners. Some were more unsavory than others. Serafina's voice dropped to a whisper. There was one man, Antonio Ferri, who was particularly close to him. My father once promised me to his son before the arrangement with Count Ricci proved more advantageous. And you think this Ferri is behind the letter? I don't know, but it would make sense. The Ferris were furious when the marriage arrangement was broken. Their shipping company had been failing. They needed the Castellano connection to survive. Dominic paced the small porch, his mind racing. We need to resolve this once and for all. You and the boys can't live under this shadow forever. What do you propose? Serafina asked, hope and fear mingling in her voice. First, we need to understand exactly what threat remains. I have connections in Venice, discreet people who can investigate without drawing attention. He stopped pacing, turning to her with determination. Then, once we know what we're facing, we can decide how best to protect our family. Our family. The words hung between them, filled with promise and commitment. The boys are waking, Serafina said, hearing movement inside the cottage. We should continue this later. The morning passed in a swirl of domestic activity. The twins, having processed the miraculous appearance of their father overnight, greeted Dominic with cautious enthusiasm at breakfast. Their questions came in an endless stream about his buildings, his travels, his childhood. "Did you build things when you were our age?" Lorenzo asked, eyes bright with curiosity. "I did," Dominic confirmed. "My father was a carpenter. He taught me to respect wood, to understand grain and texture before I ever picked up a tool." "Our grandfather was a carpenter?" Matteo's voice held wonder at this newfound connection to his heritage. Dominic nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "He would have adored you both. He always said the greatest joy in life was to pass knowledge from one generation to the next." As the boys cleared their breakfast dishes, Dominic leaned closer to Serafina. "They deserve to know their true heritage, the good parts at least. My family in Milan, your mother's family, not just the shadows your father cast." "Yes," she agreed softly. "I've told them what I could, but there are gaps, things I couldn't explain without revealing too much." "We'll fill those gaps together," Dominic promised. "Build a complete picture for them." After breakfast, Dominic found himself drawn into the boys' morning routine. They showed him their small vegetable garden, their collection of stones gathered from the beach, the treehouse Serafina had helped them build in the ancient olive behind the cottage. "You climbed up there?" Dominic asked her, eyebrows raised as he surveyed the rickety structure. "Someone had to hammer the difficult nails," she replied with a hint of her old mischief. "Besides, these two insisted their house needed architectural integrity." "Mama said that means it won't fall down," Lorenzo explained seriously. "A very important principle," Dominic agreed, equally serious. "Perhaps we could reinforce a few areas, though. Make it even stronger." The morning turned to afternoon as they worked together on the treehouse, Dominic teaching his sons basic carpentry skills passed down from his own father. Serafina watched from below, sketching the scene with quick, sure strokes. Father and sons, heads bent together over their project, three profiles so similar it made her heart ache. When the boys ran inside to fetch water, Dominic climbed down to examine her drawing. "You've captured them perfectly," he said, admiration in his voice. "You always had a gift for the essential lines." "I've had plenty of practice," Serafina replied. "Drawing them, drawing you from memory. It kept me sane during the hardest times." Dominic studied her face in the dappled sunlight. "What happens now, Serafina?" "Practically speaking. The boys are in school here, but this threat—" "I don't know," she admitted. "For so long, running was my only strategy, hiding. But I'm tired of living in fear, Dominic. Tired of looking over my shoulder. Our sons deserve better than a mother constantly preparing for the next escape." "Then we face it together," Dominic said firmly. "Whatever, whoever is behind that letter, we confront it head on." "How?" "I have an idea," Dominic began, but was interrupted by shouts from inside the cottage. "Mama! Papa! Someone's coming!" The unfamiliar title, Papa, sent a jolt through Dominic even as alarm prickled along his spine. He and Serafina hurried around the cottage to see a carriage approaching along the narrow road. "Are you expecting anyone?" Dominic asked quietly. Serafina shook her head, her face pale. "No one knows you're here, no one except—" "Except who?" "The school headmistress. I told her of your arrival this morning." Her eyes widened with sudden fear. "Dominic, what if she's connected to whoever sent that letter? What if telling her I'd found you triggered something?" Dominic moved protectively in front of Serafina as the carriage drew closer. "Get the boys inside. Lock the doors." As Serafina hurried to comply, Dominic stood his ground, watching the approaching vehicle with narrowed eyes. He would not let anyone threaten his newly found family. Not again. Not ever. The carriage stopped at the garden gate. The door opened, and a well-dressed man in his 60s descended, followed by a younger man who bore a striking resemblance to him. Architect Valente, the older man called, his Venetian accent unmistakable. "How fortunate to find you here. We've been searching for quite some time." Dominic's body tensed, ready for confrontation. "And you are?" "Antonio Ferri," the man replied with a slight bow. "And my son, Marco. We have business to discuss regarding the Castellano legacy." Behind him, Dominic heard the cottage door open. Serafina stood on the threshold, her face drained of color as she stared at the visitors. "Antonio," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "after all these years." "Serafina Castellano," Ferri replied, his tone inscrutable. "Or should I say Sofia Navarro? You've led us on quite a chase, my dear." "How did you find me now after 8 years?" Serafina asked, her hand gripping the doorframe for support. Antonio's mouth curved in a humorless smile. "Your father's death freed certain resources. His personal records revealed suspicions about your whereabouts that he'd kept to himself. For 3 years, we've been following your trail from Rome to Amalfi. The architect's arrival," he nodded toward Dominic, "merely confirmed what we already suspected. His very public search for you over the years made him easy to track." Dominic moved to Serafina's side, taking her hand firmly in his. "Whatever business you think you have with the Castellano family, it died with Giuseppe." "If only that were true," Ferri sighed, an unexpected weariness entering his voice. "But I'm afraid the past is not so easily buried, especially when it involves promises made and broken. Debts unpaid." "What debt?" Serafina demanded, finding her courage. "My father owed you nothing." "On the contrary," Marco Ferri spoke for the first time, his eyes cold as they assessed Serafina. "Your father promised you to me, a promise sealed with business arrangements that collapsed when he chose Ricci instead. Our family never recovered from that betrayal." "I was never yours to claim," Serafina's voice shook with anger. "Neither my father nor you had any right to decide my future." Antonio Ferri spread his hands in a placating gesture. "Perhaps not. But actions have consequences, Serafina. Your disappearance merely delayed the inevitable reckoning." "What do you want?" Dominic asked bluntly. "Money. Compensation for this perceived slight." "Justice," Marco answered. "Recognition of the wrong done to our family." As the standoff continued, the cottage door opened wider. Lorenzo and Matteo slipped out to stand beside their parents, their young faces solemn but unafraid as they regarded the strangers. Seeing the boys, something shifted in Antonio Ferri's expression. A flicker of surprise followed by what might have been shame. "Your sons," he said quietly. "They have your eyes, Serafina, and their father's bearing." "They are innocent in all this," Serafina replied, her hands on their shoulders. "Whatever grievance you hold against my father, against me, it has nothing to do with them." The elder Ferri studied the family tableau before him, something complex working behind his eyes. Dominic could see the conflict there, a man torn between decades of bitterness and the innocent reality before him. "Those boys," Antonio said finally, his voice softer than before. "They remind me of you and your brother as children, Marco." Marco's expression flickered with momentary confusion, then understanding. "Uncle Paolo's sons," he said quietly. Antonio nodded, a shadow crossing his face. "My brother's children, caught in a feud not of their making. We lost them in that shipping accident, another casualty of business rivalries." He sighed deeply, the weight of old grief evident in his posture. "Perhaps you're right, Serafina. Perhaps it is time to let old wounds heal." "Father," Marco began to protest, "what about our family's honor? What about—" Antonio silenced him with a raised hand. "Honor?" he repeated. "What honor is there in persecuting children? Would you have these boys grow up in fear, as Serafina has lived these past years? He turned back to Dominic and Serafina. We came seeking resolution to an old vendetta, but I find I have no appetite for vengeance against children. Not any more. Dominic stepped forward. Then let us end it here. Today, whatever financial redress you seek for the broken arrangement. It was never about money, Antonio interrupted. It was about honor, about a promise broken. Then let a new promise take its place, Dominic suggested. A promise that the past remains in the past, that our children, all our children, inherit a future unburdened by old hatreds. A long silence followed as Antonio considered the proposal. Finally, he nodded slowly. Very well, Architect Valente. I will consider the debt paid, on one condition. Which is, Serafina asked warily, that you both return to Venice, openly. Take your rightful place in society as the family you were meant to be. A faint smile curved his lips. Let the gossips see that Serafina Castellano chose love over duty, happiness over arrangement. It would be a fitting epilogue to the story, I think. And a public acknowledgement that my father's plans failed, Serafina said, understanding dawning. A final victory over Giuseppe Castellano. If you wish to see it that way, Antonio agreed. Do we have an accord? Dominic looked to Serafina, leaving the decision in her hands. After a moment, she nodded. We have an accord. The boys should know Venice, should know their heritage, both the shadows and the light. As the Ferris returned to their carriage, a weight seemed to lift from the small family still standing at the cottage door. The threat that had hung over Serafina for 8 years was finally dispelled. Not by further running, but by facing it directly. Is it really over? She asked Dominic as the carriage disappeared down the road. I believe it is, he replied, drawing her close. The past has no more power over us. Only the future matters now. As if to affirm his words, Lorenzo tugged at their hands. Does this mean we're going to Venice, to see where you and Mama fell in love? Dominic knelt to his son's level, including them both in his gaze. Would you like that? To see the city where your mother and I met, where I designed my first buildings? Will we live in a palazzo on the Grand Canal? Matteo asked, eyes wide with childhood imagination. Serafina laughed, the sound freer than Dominic had heard since his arrival. Perhaps not right away, she said, but we'll find a home worthy of our family, a place to build new memories. As the boys ran off to discuss this exciting development, Dominic turned to Serafina, his expression serious. Are you truly ready to return, after everything? With you beside me? She smiled, reaching up to touch his face. I'm ready for anything. Chapter 11. Meeting his sons. 3 days after the Ferris's departure, the small cottage buzzed with activity. Trunks stood half-packed in the main room, and the boys darted about in excitement, deciding which treasures were essential for their journey to Venice. The threat that had shadowed their lives had lifted, leaving behind a family poised on the threshold of a new beginning. Papa, will we see real gondolas? Lorenzo asked, the title falling naturally from his lips now. In the short time since Dominic's arrival, the twins had embraced him with the uncomplicated acceptance unique to children. Dozens, Dominic promised, helping him fold a small shirt. And we'll ride in them too. The best way to see Venice is from the water. And your buildings? Matteo asked, always the more thoughtful of the pair. Will we see those? Every one, Dominic assured him, though some may need a bit of restoration after all these years. Serafina, overhearing as she entered with freshly laundered clothes, smiled warmly. Your father is being modest. His buildings are among the most admired in Venice. Even after 8 years away, his reputation remains strong. The ease with which they had fallen into family rhythms still amazed Dominic. There were awkward moments, certainly, times when his ignorance of the boys' routines or preferences reminded them all of the years lost. But those moments were overshadowed by the joy of discovery, of connecting threads long separated. That afternoon, while Serafina visited the school to arrange for the boys' records to be transferred, Dominic took his sons to the beach. The day was perfect. Warm sunshine, gentle waves, the scent of salt and pine in the air. As the twins splashed in the shallows, Dominic watched from the shore, his heart full beyond measure. "Are there beaches in Venice?" Matteo called, wading back toward him. "Not like this one," Dominic replied. "Venice is built on water, surrounded by a lagoon. But there's the Lido, a long island with beautiful beaches, just a short boat ride from the city." "Will we have a boat?" Lorenzo joined them, water dripping from his dark curls. "Perhaps. Would you like that?" Both boys nodded enthusiastically. Dominic made a mental note to look into suitable watercraft once they were settled. These sons of his clearly shared his love of building and creation, but they had also inherited Serafina's affinity for beauty, for art in all its forms. "Tell us about when you met Mama," Matteo requested as they spread their towels on the sand. "She tells us sometimes, but we want to hear your side." Dominic smiled, touched by the request. "I saw her across a crowded ballroom," he began, the memory vivid despite the passing years. "She was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, standing by a window with moonlight in her hair." "Was it love at first sight?" Lorenzo asked, eyes wide. "For me, yes," Dominic admitted, "though your mother might say I'm being romantic. But when our eyes met across that room, something inside me recognized her, as if my soul had been waiting for hers. That's what Mama says too," Matteo confided, "that when she saw you, the rest of the room disappeared." Warmth spread through Dominic's chest at this revelation. "Does she now?" "She told us you danced together," Lorenzo continued, "and then walked in a garden where you could see all of Venice." "We did," Dominic confirmed. It was a terrace overlooking the Grand Canal. The night was perfect. Stars above, water below, music drifting from inside. I knew that night that I had found something rare and precious. "And then her papa tried to keep you apart," Matteo said, his young face serious. "Like in the fairy tales." Dominic nodded, carefully navigating this difficult subject. "Your grandfather had different plans for your mother. He didn't understand that love should be a choice, not an arrangement. But you found us anyway," Lorenzo said with satisfaction, "even though it took a long time." "I would have searched forever," Dominic told them, his voice rough with emotion. "Some things are worth waiting for, worth fighting for. The three of you, you're worth everything." The boys absorbed this, exchanging one of their silent twin communications. Then, with the directness of children, Lorenzo asked, "Do you love Mama still, even after she hid us?" The question pierced Dominic's heart. "Yes," he answered without hesitation. "I've loved your mother every day since we met. Even when I didn't know where she was, even when I didn't know about you two, my heart belonged to her." "Good," Matteo nodded decisively, "because she cried a lot when she thought we couldn't hear, especially on your birthday. She marked it on the calendar every year." This revelation stunned Dominic. "She remembered my birthday." "August 12th, both boys said in unison. "She would light a candle and look at your picture and cry," Lorenzo added. "We didn't know why until now." That evening, after the twins were asleep, Dominic found Serafina on the porch, gazing at the star-filled sky. He joined her in silence, their shoulders touching lightly. "The boys told me something interesting today," he said finally. "Oh." Serafina turned to him, her expression curious. "They said you marked my birthday each year, lit a candle. A flush crept across her cheeks. They weren't supposed to know about that. Why did you never reach out, Serafina? A letter, a message, anything. She sighed, her gaze returning to the stars. Fear at first, then pride, then the weight of time itself. Her voice dropped to a whisper. How do you bridge 8 years of silence? What words could possibly explain or excuse such absence? Any words, Dominic replied gently. Any contact would have been better than wondering if you were even alive. I know that now, she acknowledged. I made mistakes, Dominic. Decisions that seemed right at the time, but that I've questioned every day since. She turned to face him fully. Can you truly forgive those years of silence? Dominic considered the question carefully, wanting his answer to be honest. I won't pretend those years didn't hurt, he said finally. But when I look at our sons, these incredible boys you've raised so beautifully, I can't regret the path that created them. And I can't hold on to anger when we've been given this second chance. Relief softened Serafina's features. They adore you already, she said. It's remarkable how quickly they've accepted you, how naturally they call you Papa. Children have an instinct for truth, Dominic replied. They sense that I love them, that I would do anything for them. For all of us, Serafina asked, vulnerability in her voice. In answer, Dominic drew her gently into his arms. For all of you, he confirmed. My family, my heart. As they stood together beneath the Italian stars, the future stretched before them like the sea below, vast, full of possibility, no longer threatening but promising. Venice awaited them, not as a place of painful memories, but as the setting for their new beginning. Inside the cottage, their sons slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that tomorrow and all the tomorrows after would include both their mother and the father they had only just discovered. The family circle, broken for so long, was finally complete. In the quiet of the night, Dominic held Serafina close, breathing in the scent of her hair, marveling at the miracle of having her in his arms again. 8 years of searching, of longing, had led to this moment, not just a reunion of lovers, but the forging of a family that should have been together all along. I never thought this possible, Serafina whispered against his chest. Even in my most hopeful moments, I couldn't imagine us here, like this. Believe it, Dominic murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. Believe in us, in what we've always been to each other. As if in response to his words, a shooting star traced a brilliant path across the night sky, a celestial affirmation of promises renewed, and a future reclaimed from the shadows of the past. Chapter 12. Passion Rekindled. Venice welcomed them home with golden light dancing across ancient stones. As their gondola glided along the Grand Canal, Dominic watched his sons' faces transform with wonder. Lorenzo and Matteo leaned precariously over the sides, pointing at palazzos, while Serafina steadied them with a mother's protective hand. It's just as you described, she said softly, her eyes reflecting the same awe as their children's. I'd forgotten how it feels to return here. Nervous? He asked, covering her hand with his. A little, she admitted, but mostly free. For the first time in 8 years, I can walk without looking over my shoulder. 1 month after their return, as autumn painted Venice in russet and gold, Dominic led Serafina to a waiting gondola at twilight. There's something I want to show you. The gondolier guided them along familiar canals until they reached the Palazzo Contarini, where they had first met 8 years before. The palazzo was quiet, but a caretaker admitted them with a knowing smile. As they climbed the marble staircase, Serafina's hand trembled slightly in Dominic's grasp. So many memories, she murmured. I feel like that young woman again, heart pounding as a handsome architect led me away from the crowd. The terrace was exactly as they remembered, but Dominic had transformed it with hundreds of candles, their flames dancing in the gentle evening breeze. A small table held champagne and a simple supper. "Oh, Dominic," Serafina gasped. "It's perfect." "Not quite," he said, his voice suddenly serious. From his pocket he withdrew a small velvet box, not new but worn at the edges from years of handling. "There's something missing." Inside lay an emerald ring surrounded by diamonds, the exact shade of green as her eyes. "I bought this 6 months after you disappeared," Dominic explained, his voice thick with emotion. "I carried it for 8 years, through every city, every search." Tears filled Serafina's eyes as moonlight caught the facets of the emerald. "You never gave up," she whispered. Then, in a gesture that surprised her, he set the box aside without removing the ring. "But that ring belongs to the past. Tonight I want to offer you something new." From his other pocket he produced a second box of polished olive wood. Inside nestled a ring of breathtaking design, a platinum band holding a central diamond surrounded by smaller emeralds and sapphires. "The diamond represents our enduring love," Dominic explained. "The emeralds are for you, the sapphires for our sons." He took her hand, his eyes never leaving hers. "This ring is not about the years we lost, but about the future we're building together." Moonlight silvered Serafina's tears as Dominic knelt before her. "8 years ago, on this terrace, I fell in love with you at first sight. That love has never wavered, never diminished. Through separation and silence, through lonely nights and empty days, my heart has belonged only to you." His voice broke slightly, raw passion making his words vibrate with emotion. "I planned a pretty speech, but kneeling here now, all I can say is that I love you, Serafina Castellano. I have loved you since the moment I saw you. I will love you until my last breath, and if there's anything beyond this life, I will love you there too." He held up the ring, its facets capturing and multiplying the candlelight. "Will you marry me? Will you make official what our hearts have known from the beginning, that we are meant to be together, that our souls recognized each other that night as two halves of a whole?" Serafina lifted him to his feet, her hands framing his beloved face. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Yes, today and all our tomorrows. As I've loved you through presence and absence, through joy and heartbreak, I will love you through whatever comes next." When Dominic slipped the ring onto her finger, the universe itself seemed to align, righting what had been off-center since their separation. Under the Venetian moon, their lips met in a kiss that held both tender reverence and passionate promise. 8 years of longing poured into a kiss that seemed to stop time itself. The palazzo that awaited them was quiet, the twins still with Alessandro for the night. As Dominic led Serafina through shadowed rooms to their bedchamber, anticipation built between them, a tangible current of desire held in check for far too long. In the privacy of their room, illuminated only by moonlight, they rediscovered each other with reverent passion. Dominic's fingers trembled as he unfastened her gown, revealing the soft skin he had dreamed of touching again for 8 long years. "You're shaking," she observed softly. "I feel like that night in Venice again," he admitted. "Overwhelmed by you, afraid I might wake and find this is just another dream." Serafina guided his hands to her bare shoulders as her dress fell away. "Not a dream," she assured him. "I'm here. We're here. Together." Their second first time was both familiar and new, bodies remembered yet changed by time. As they moved together in the moonlight, it transcended physical passion. It was the completion of a circle broken 8 years before, the fulfillment of promises whispered despite impossible odds. Their union became something almost sacred, two souls finding harbor after years adrift on separate seas. Dawn found them still awake, unwilling to surrender to sleep and miss a moment of their reunion. As the first light painted their room in gold and rose, Dominic gazed down at Serafina with such tenderness that fresh tears sprang to her eyes. "Why are you crying?" he asked gently. "Because I'm happy," she replied simply. "Because after so much darkness, I never expected this much light." 3 months later, on a crisp winter morning with sunlight dancing across the lagoon, they exchanged vows in the small church near their home. Lorenzo and Matteo stood proudly beside their father, matching rings on satin pillows. The twins had thrived in Venice, their initial uncertainty giving way to wonder and excitement, though they sometimes still woke from nightmares of having to flee, echoes of their years in hiding. Each day in their family's love had healed another wound. As the gondola carried them toward the celebration waiting at their home, Dominic drew Serafina close against the December chill. "Happy?" he asked, though her radiant face had already answered. "Beyond words," she replied, her gaze taking in their sons at the bow, then returning to her husband's beloved face. "This is what I dreamed of during the darkest nights. You, our children, Venice, home." Dominic lifted her hand, pressing a kiss to the ring that symbolized their future. "Not the end of our story," he promised, "just the beginning of a new chapter." As they passed beneath the Rialto Bridge, a shower of rose petals floated down from spectators above. Lorenzo and Matteo laughed in delight, reaching up to catch the fragrant blossoms. 8 years of longing had culminated in this perfect moment, a family made whole, a love story that had defied time and circumstance, hearts that had found their way back to each other across an ocean of silence. "I love you, Serafina Valente," Dominic whispered, her new name a declaration and a promise. "And I love you," she replied, her eyes reflecting the Venice sky, her smile holding all the warmth of their shared future. "In this life and whatever lies beyond." In the heart of Venice, where their story had begun 8 years before, they had found not just each other again, but the family they were always meant to be. And in that discovery lay the greatest passion of all, the enduring, unbreakable bond of a love that had transcended time, distance, and all the forces that had tried to keep them apart.